series on views, and tonight I've written it down so I don't forget. Finding Release from the Thicket of Views, Part 2. And I'm sure everyone really appreciated Artabandhu, your introductory talk last week. It was very engaging and very enjoyable, and it was very striking how well prepared you were. That really came across. And I don't know if you've got any football analogies tonight, but I do like them when you drop them in.
You might just I think.
They do work for me. Anyway, thank you, Artabandhu, and over to you.
Great. Okay. So these talks have sort of taken on a bit of a life of their own. So I had a kind of idea in mind when I first started thinking about it, and then I wrote a blurb for it, and then I started writing the talks themselves, and so I sort of feel slightly like I'm not quite on target with the brief of talking about views, but I think I'm still in the same ballpark, hopefully, because I've sort of chosen to speak quite a lot about this teaching of the 3 levels of wisdom. And the reason I chose that is I thought that I think there is something in this, that it's a way of deepening our understanding of the Dharma from when we first encounter the Dharma as ideas and concepts, through all the way potentially to the enlightenment that the Buddha attained. And it's sort of, I think it's quite a good list to sort of show how that transition is made from ideas into experience, into embodying the truth in ourselves. So we're going to carry on exploring these 3 levels of wisdom. Last week we looked quite a lot at the level of wisdom of hearing the Dharma, or reading the Dharma, it could also be understood as. And now we're going to move into reflecting upon the Dharma. And what I wanted to start off with is this story from the Indian and Tibetan, Indian tradition. A story about a man who later becomes Naropa, a very famous tantric guru, who is part of the lineage that the more famous Milarepa belongs to. I'm going to tell you a little episode from his life. And when we meet Naropa in this story, he's actually called Abhaya Kirti, which for anyone who's been around the Buddhist Center a good while, he used to be the chairman of Abhaya Kirti, but this isn't the same person, just to clear that up at the start. So this is a long time ago, before the Nottingham Buddhist Center existed. This is in the 10th century I'm talking about. So in the 10th century, there was a very learned monk. This is Abhaya Kirti. And he was the abbot of a famous Buddhist university. Anyone who's been on pilgrimage, Buddhist pilgrimage, might well have been to see this university. It's called Nalanda, and it's in northern India, in modern Bihar. And you can see quite a lot of the ruins of this university, and you get some sense of what an incredible place it must have been so many centuries, but back in the 10th century. Considering how much of it's still sort of visible to this day. Anyway, so he, at one stage in this university, Nalanda, he was the abbot, and he had a very good, strong reputation as a very learned scholar. Just realized I've not turned my timer on. I'll do it while I remember. So he was about that a bit more. There we go. It's working. So he was very well regarded, a real scholar, a great debater, and had a very good reputation. And we join him in this little episode. He's sitting in his study, very sort of sparse room, kind of monk-like space that he just sits in, very simple. and he has his back to the window. Through the window, the sunlight is pouring, but he is facing away. And he's at this desk, poring over Buddhist texts, thinking about them, memorizing them, doing what he does most of his time. And then all of a sudden, the shadow is cast across the room, and it causes him to look up to see what's going on. And at his window, he sees an old crone, and she's very shocking in appearance. She has no teeth. She's got very wild, unwashed hair. She's quite old and wrinkly and sort of a bit ugly, to be honest. And he's a bit shocked to see this figure. And even more shocked when she starts sort of just asking him questions and sort of harassing him to some extent. And she says, "Who are you?" And he says, "Well, I'm the abbot of this great university, Nalanda." And she says, "Well, what are you doing?" And he says, "Well, I'm reading and studying the teachings of the Buddha." And she said, "Oh, well, that's very good, but do you understand them?" And he says, "Well, of course I understand these teachings. I'm an expert. There's no one who understands them better than me." And she says, "Well," he says, "I understand every word." And then the crone says, "Yes, but do you understand the meaning of the teachings?" And again, he's insistent that he knows this stuff and says yes. And she, at this point, screams, jumps into the air and collapses on the floor, bangs her fists on the ground and says, "How could you, a monk, lie? You don't understand the meaning of the teachings. But my brother, Tilopa, he does." And at the moment he hears this name, Tilopa, Abhayakirti begins to weep uncontrollably, and the hair on his head stands on end, and he has this sort of inexplicable devotion for the name of this teacher. And he realizes there and then that he has to leave the monastery, he has to leave his position, his reputation behind, and go and seek this teacher, Tilopa. Because although he understands the words, he realizes he doesn't understand the deeper meaning of the Dharma. So that's our little story, just to start us off on this theme of reflecting upon the Dharma. Because I think in a way, if we were just to hear the Dharma, read the Dharma and study the Dharma, we would be in a similar position to Abhayakirti in this story. We might be very expert and be able to kind of lecture and say all sorts of things about the Dharma, but in a way we'd just be rearranging words and following the rules of logic and creating argument and explanation, but not necessarily with any experience or any depth to give that any real substance. We might be able to talk about it, but are we really embodying these teachings? That's the point that she's saying. And this figure, Tilopa, who's a great Buddhist teacher of a very different nature, he lives it as well as understands it. So Naropa, in a way, I mean, the story, I'm sure there's more to him than the story gives us, but in a way he's described as sort of being stuck, simply exploring the Dharma through the intellect. And as such, he has right view in the sense that he's heard the Dharma. He has some Buddhist concepts that he understands quite well on an intellectual level, very well on an intellectual level, but it goes no deeper. It can't completely change him if it just remains at that point. Now, I was stressing this last week that that doesn't mean studying the Dharma isn't important. In a way, he's done a lot of preparation through that study of the Dharma, and in a way he's very ripe to take it to the next stage, and he proves to be he goes on to be a great Dharma teacher, and this lineage that includes Milarepa, he's one of the conditions that brings that about. So yeah, study and understanding the Dharma on that level is very important, but we can't just leave it there. We need to add something else to this mixture. So we're going to talk about that tonight, or I'm going to talk about that tonight, about what that is, and I'm suggesting that at this stage it's about reflecting upon the Dharma, bringing the Dharma to bear on our lives, and in a way having experience of the truth of the Dharma more directly and personally. So we need to start to reflect on what we've learnt, what we've studied about the Dharma. So I'm going to talk about reflection, and I've kind of divided it up into two aspects. These are just coming from my own thought about reflection. The first I want to talk about is reflection on what happens when you apply the Dharma or right view in your life. So in a sense, when you start to put the teachings into practice, you start to live them out, what happens and how we can reflect on this process and come to have a more real understanding of the truth of the Dharma through that. So that's the first area. And then secondly, I want to cover something around what reflection kind of looks like or feels like. How do you know if you are reflecting? And what do you need? What can you put in place to help you cultivate it? What conditions and what attitudes? So we're going to start with this first aspect of reflection about what happens when you apply the teachings. And I'll read you a quote from a text called the Ganavyuha Sutra. And it says, just as a goldsmith tests gold by burning, cutting, and rubbing it, so you must examine my words and accept them, but not merely out of reverence. Just as a goldsmith tests gold by burning, cutting, and rubbing it, so you must examine my words and accept them, but not merely out of reverence. So that's attributed to the Buddha as an instruction on how to respond to his teaching. So that metaphor, the image of the goldsmith testing gold, you could take that to mean that when in terms of the Dharma, what we need to do is rigorously kind of challenge it in a way, put it into practice and see if it really lives up to what we're told about it. Does it really liberate us? Does it really benefit us? And the only way to really know that directly for oneself is to apply it and see what happens. So this might, in some ways, this might seem quite obvious, but it can be something that we don't necessarily get round to doing, or we might do it with some aspects of the Dharma and sort of forget to apply other aspects of the Dharma that we've learnt. So even if we get really excited and inspired by a Dharma teaching or something we've studied or a talk that appeals to us in some way, it may not necessarily follow that we then go away and put it into practice. We might just sort of stop at the point where we've got quite inspired and excited, and then just because habits can be so strong, or we can kind of just lose our mindfulness, it ends up that we don't follow it through, we don't act upon that inspiration. I think it's very important in lots of ways to act in some way on the inspiration we have for the Dharma. Otherwise, we miss this opportunity to sort of take it beyond ideas, and even ideas that inspire us, into something that we live out and are transformed by. So to do this, a very practical way of doing this is to, if you hear a teaching or something about a teaching that inspires you, plan how you're going to practically put that into practice. Until we do that, it will just be theory. So I remember when I was around the centre taking part in doing the intro courses and things, one of the things we would often suggest to people was that they take, when we were teaching around the 5 precepts, the suggestion was we'd say it was your homework to take one precept, and for the next week to try and kind of follow that and let that help change the way you act in the world. And of course, with the precepts, they're given in a positive form and a negative form. So, if, for instance, yes, you could aspire for the next week to abstain from taking the not given, and to actively practice doing generous things, acting generously, sort of just from the simplest thing of making people a cup of tea or helping them with a job or anything of that nature. And to just sort of consciously try and put that into action. So that could be applied to any practical teaching of the Dharma, which is simply sort of saying, giving us an instruction. Try this, cultivate this quality. So it could be that you really test this meditation practice of the metta bhavana or metta in general, or mindfulness. What happens when you try to apply mindfulness to your life? So the first thing is you try and put it into practice, do something about it. And then I'd say the reflection kind of comes in when you've done that. You start to look at what comes as a result. And what can be quite useful if you're doing a practice like this is for, at the end of each day, you just have some space to sit and just reflect on whatever those actions were that were related to the precept, and to just consider what the outcome of them was, what the fruits of that was. And also, you can obviously reflect on other times where you haven't done that, and maybe you've gone against the precept, you've acted in ways that are less than generous. And again, there you can reflect on what were the consequences of those actions. What did it lead to? What kind of mental states did that lead to? And all of this reflection starts to make the teaching more relevant in your life. You start to see how it's affecting your own life, your own experience, your own mind. And you're starting to lift the Dharma off the page and to live it out, testing it like this goldsmith tests the gold. Now, at first, that can seem a little bit clunky and a little bit artificial to sort of be deciding that you're going to follow a precept and sort of try and put it into practice. But it's just, there's no other way to sort of start doing it, really. You just got to get that, start taking that up. And then in time, it becomes more natural to be testing the Dharma in this way. And things that at first you were having to kind of deliberately put into your life start to happen more naturally for you. And all this process is all food for further reflection and developing this sort of personal understanding of whether the Dharma is true, whether the Dharma can work for you. So I was thinking you could see it in a way that what we're doing is being sort of Dharma scientists, running experiments to see if this teaching is right view, if it really can benefit us, if it can really lead us towards a wiser way of being in the world. And any scientist will know that if you really want to get sort of accurate good quality results from your experiments, you've just got to keep repeating them and change some of the variables and look at what you've changed and what the fruits were, what the different results were, and just do it again and again, and just take in all this data, if you like. I'm getting the science metaphor might not appeal to everyone, but hopefully you can see my point. So you've just got to kind of put it into practice and really just watch and notice and be quite sensitive and aware of what feedback you get from this, what's happening, what's not happening. And in a way we can kind of share what we find, learn from each other in this process as well. So there's a line from a very famous early text attributed to the Buddha called the Sutta Nipata. And it's just a line, quite a short line, that's appealed to me for quite some time. And it says, it might need a little bit of unpacking for some of you. It says, seers of dependent origination are skilled in action and its result. So dependent origination is one way of talking about the Buddha's insight into the way all things in the world, in existence, are conditioned, arise in dependence upon conditions. They all have a cause. So seers of dependent origination, anyone who's a seer of dependent origination must be, I'm assuming, an enlightened being on the level of the Buddha. So anyone who's attained that level of wisdom, it boils down to them being skilled in action and its result. They've for a long time practiced acting in skillful ways and observing the results of their actions. I find it quite sort of, very simple, but quite profound, that's what it boils down to, is just becoming deeply skilled in action and its result. So I think that in what I was describing is putting the teachings into practice and seeing what comes back, what the results are. I think that is developing the skill in action and its result. And you just kind of keep doing that in different ways in your Buddhist Dharma practice, and you start to see how it's all working, what effects all the different conditions are having, and how you can gradually, as you become more skilled and aware, you can steer that so that you're developing more and more positive mental states, and refining your mind and being, and moving towards what the Buddha showed us was possible. So that's this first sort of way I wanted to talk about reflection. And now I want to kind of move on to something a little bit different, but it's relevant to all I've said already. So all these things I'll say about what reflection is like, or what we're looking for when we talk about reflection, can be applied to how you do that kind of reflection around what it is to what happens when you apply the Dharma. So I found this D.H. Lawrence quote that I quite like, that I think for me is about what we're talking about tonight, the reflection. In the quote, he actually uses thinking as the phrase, and he says, so in a way what he says is that ordinary thinking is just the juggling and twisting of already existent ideas. So this is a bit like, perhaps this is what Naropa was doing as a great scholar and debater, just sort of playing with language and logic on its own level, but not necessarily kind of going deeper into experience. And what we want to do at this stage of reflection is to start to go deeper than just rearranging words and kind of working things out through logic. Again, not that that's not important, but that's not we don't want to get stuck there, or kind of just limit ourselves to that approach. So I said last week that if we do each of the stages of the 3 levels of wisdom, if we do the first one thoroughly, the second one will kind of naturally come from that. The momentum from that, doing that first one thoroughly, will mean that reflection just starts and happens quite naturally. And I was thinking back to my early experience of sort of first hearing the Dharma and getting involved in Triratna, learning about the basics of the Dharma. And one thing I was really struck by is I would just, for quite a long period afterwards, everything I did, everything I saw, every film I watched, every song I heard on the radio, I'd see it, I'd think it was about the Dharma in a way, or I'd see it from the perspective of what I was learning about the Dharma. And it was really, yeah, quite a strong experience. That it was obviously really touching me, and I was kind of being kind of filled up with it and affected with it, that it was causing me to look at the world through that lens of the Dharma. And I think this is sort of what we're, as best we can, what we're trying to sort of start to get ourselves to do is have the Dharma within us, and in that form of taking it in through the concepts and the ideas, but then to start to use that so that we look at the world a bit differently. We look at the world through the lens of these different teachings. So if that's starting to happen to you, I'd say that's quite a positive thing, that if you allow that to kind of unfold and support that, it will become real reflection. As I think this is all, for some of us, this will be quite natural, and it's all very human stuff. That reflection, this deeper way of thinking, is something we're all capable of. We all have the capacity to reflect in this way, but we might have to do things to set up conditions in our lives that make it more likely to happen, and allow for it to happen more and more. So just to say a little bit about, describe what I'm kind of trying to talk about when I say reflection. The way I've been thinking of it is it's when you sort of think about the Dharma or think about life in a way that's more spacious to normal thinking, and is kind of slower, and some of that thinking is sort of done beneath the surface of our everyday awareness. I think we probably all had the experience where you're talking to somebody and you suddenly try to recall a name or of an actor or a friend or something, and you can't kind of get it, and then you go away, and you're doing something completely different, or you're doing nothing at all, and then the word kind of just somehow comes into your mind. You're probably all familiar with what I'm talking about. And I think in a way there's some connection with what reflection is like. I mean, I don't know really what's going on in that process, but I guess something happens in the depths, and reflection is like this, that you take in the Dharma, and then if it really matters to you, your unconscious aspects will be working away at it, will be kind of thinking away about it down underground, whatever metaphor you want to go with. And giving yourself space and time is what allows that to kind of take place. Having a sort of silence in your life, or periods where you're just not stimulating yourself in some way, that's what allows that to happen. So reflecting as this kind of slow approach to thinking about something, or just you just kind of sit and take in the world around you. And if you've got the Dharma in you and it matters to you, you'll start to kind of see it around you, and start to see whether these teachings are true by looking at the world through that lens. So I wanted just to give you one little example of something that I felt was a fruit of kind of reflective practice. And this was some years ago. So I was doing some I've been doing quite a lot of preparation to talk on karma and rebirth at the centre one night. And I also had this job where I was travelling on a bus, half an hour. So I was doing that bus journey quite regularly. And I got into quite a good habit of treating that, most of the time, treating that as an opportunity to just kind of sit and look out the window and get into a kind of reflective space. So I was, and I'd managed to kind of get the seat on the top of the double-decker bus right at the front. So I had this sort of panoramic view of the world, and I was going to look at it through the lens of the Dharma. So, and all I did was just sort of sit up there, felt I was quite present, quite in my body, and I looked out the window, looked at the world as it sort of passed by. And I'd been reflecting about the skandhas, I think, and about how we have feeling arises as we have a sensory experience come in, and then the different emotions come from that, and different reactions, all this sort of thing. And I started to see this come to life for me on this bus journey. So I saw an old man walking down the road, and I felt something in my body, a feeling just kind of kicking off, and a memory of my grandfather and an emotion related to that. And then I think I saw a picture of a nice looking ice cream on the bus shelter advertising thing. And then my mouth started to water, and I could imagine the taste and wanted the ice cream. And I had this journey of just being very sensitive and of watching how all these different stimuli were kind of affecting me in different ways, and different memories and different things were coming based on my own conditioning. And I felt very sort of sensitive to where it was all coming from. And I could kind of sense this overall kind of mood I was in as well. And I could kind of, because I was in this reflective mode, I could see in a way how it was like a cake mix of all these different impressions. And my overall experience of consciousness was what came out of the oven at the end of that. Anyway, this was my, it felt very alive, and it wasn't just ideas anymore. I was starting to sort of have my own take on it and my own experience of what was being pointed to. And when I try and put it into words, it might not necessarily give you that impression. But the thing was, it was seeing the teachings kind of in my own experience. That's the crucial thing. And when that happens for you, you really start to develop some conviction as to their truth. And that is the crucial thing. Once that starts to happen in some way, your relationship to these teachings will change significantly. Like you'll develop a lot of faith in what's being taught. So that's in a way what we're sort of trying to steer ourselves towards. And just to say about that, it wasn't like every time I got on this bus and decided to reflect, I'd have some new interesting experience and felt like I'd understood another bit of Dharma. There were lots of bus journeys where I just looked out the window and didn't really think much was happening at all. But I think that was all part of this process. So I think part of reflection is, it's kind of crucial that we're patient and we don't expect quick results. and that we don't kind of worry if nothing seems to be happening. Because reflection is of a different kind of nature. Reflection is slow, and a lot of it happens beneath the surface of our conscious awareness. So I'm going to finish in shortly. Just a couple of things I wanted to just say to finish off. Yeah, so this kind of reflective thinking about the Dharma, it's slow and steady, and the reward, you're kind of rewarded now and again with these little breakthroughs. But actually, you can get quite, you can enjoy the process of the space as well. I think that's quite important to work at doing that. So I suggest you look for points in your life, and it might be like me, that you have a bus journey where normally you just flick through a magazine or play with your phone, and I'd suggest you use that and put the phone away and just look out the window. Just give yourself, in different areas of your life, wherever there's an opportunity, the space to reflect. And even if it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes, that's still can be effective way of reflecting, still worth finding that. So this is the this is us testing the teachings in experience. Until we start to have this lived experience of the Dharma, it's very important that we're quite humble about what we actually think we know. If we think we know something because we've read it in a book, I'd say that's not enough really to believe we really know something. What we're looking for is to kind of have this kind of deeper knowing that comes from dwelling and reflecting on these teachings. So yeah, it's really important to reflect and open ourselves up by reflecting on, in a way, how little we know from actual lived experience, and how life is really quite mysterious and baffling a lot of the time. And maybe we just kind of cover that up with explanations that we've been taught that might not hold all that much, might not be all that substantial or real. And if we're prepared to open to that kind of mystery and doubt and not knowing, then we have a chance that we can really develop some real wisdom. So I'll leave it there for this evening. And I think there's a bit more I want to say about reflection next week, but we'll see what happens. Okay, thank you for that, listening.
Well, thank you, Artaban. Crikey, there's so much there.